Assalamu alaikum, fam. Hope you're doing fantastic. So, we're continuing our reading of Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit. It's a difficult text for many, but it is quite nerdy. But what's interesting about this is you see the German mind when it gets translated into English. And then, this is the man who created the Hegelian dialectic. He also created his own form of logic. People talk about him, but they rarely read his work, so this will help us to actually know the man, to know his work, and anyone who speaks about him yet is not familiar with his work should not be listened to at all, because you cannot judge what you have not read. Let's begin. We're on number 100 of sense certainty in consciousness. When we compare the relation in which knowing and the object first came on the scene. So, we're looking at the relation, knowing, and the object first came into the scene. With the relation in which they now stand in this result. So you're looking at the relation between those two, okay? We find that it is reversed. The object, which was supposed to be the essential element in sense certainty, is now the unessential element. So that's interesting. The object now has become unessential when you thought it was going to be essential because it's going to be there. For the universal, which the object has come to be, is no longer what the object was supposed essentially to be for sense certainty. Okay, so it has changed. It's no longer its essentiality. It's now trying to be sense certainty. So certainty and essentiality. On the contrary, the certainty is now to be found in the opposite element. Okay, so it's no longer in the object. So now it appears that knowing is going to be the new one. The certainty is now to be found in the opposite element viz. Sorry. Oh, geez. Which is in knowing, which previously was an essential element. Okay, so what do we have going on here? You have the relation of knowing and the object. So now, it started with the object being the essential element, it then became unessential, and now the universal, which was related to the object, is no longer going to have that relationship for sense certainty. Now, certainty is the opposite, and now knowing is going to be the essential. So, knowing was unessential, then became essential. That's what he's getting at. Its truth is in the object as my object. My object, he says. Or in its being mine, meinen. It is because I know it. So here, he italicized my, I, and mine. So it's almost like he's getting at an aspect of possession here. It's like mine. That's sense certainty. This is mine. You're certain in your senses. This is mine. You possess it. Sounds like he's saying. Then, though indeed expelled from the object, is not yet thereby overcome, but only driven back into the I. That's interesting. So, the I, the mine, and the my are a part of the sense certainty, but then that leaves the object itself, and is not overcome by it, and it's just driven back again into the I. So it sounds circular here. We have now to see what experience shows us about its reality in the I. So now the knowing has come in, because now you're going to see the I. What is that? So experience is going to help it come into reality. It was in the object, now it's out of the object. 101. The force of its truth thus lies now in the I. So the force of its truth. The force of its truth. It was expelled, now it's separate, right? In the immediacy of my seeing. Okay, so through the seeing, it's now something has happened. You saw the object, you came to know it, and now you're having this sort of interaction with it. Seeing, hearing, and so on. So you have the senses coming in. The senses helping you for the knowing. The vanishing of the single now and here that we mean is prevented by the fact that I hold them fast. So the now and the here are held within the viewer because they're seeing and hearing it in real time, essentially. Now is day because I see it. Here is a tree from the same reason. But in this relationship, sense certainty experiences the same dialectic acting upon itself. So sense certainty experiencing the same dialectic. So the object was there, came onto the scene. So you remember we were comparing the relation of knowing and the object. It's there. The situations get reversed. The essential element changes. So knowing becomes the essential element. Then through that, we get to the my object, mine, I know it, sense certainty that's expelled from it. It's not overcome yet, so you haven't really gotten into it very deeply here to really explore what it is. But through the senses, you're going to be able to utilize the force of its truth to see what lies within the I. Right? This is very, very unique, his writing here. See the tree and assert that here is a tree, but another I sees this house and maintains that here is not a tree, but a house instead. So it's almost like he's talking about just the way in which the I, the you, I see this, I see that, these objects that come into knowing. Each time you look at something, you come to know of it. Both truths have the same authentication, viz. The immediacy of seeing. Yeah, exactly. So how are you going to authenticate it? You're going to see it, and there's a truth in that. And the certainty of assurance. So you're going to assure yourself by coming to know it, which is going to be one of the essential elements, right? Yeah, so makes sense. He's just describing this cognitive process that both have about their knowing, but one truth vanishes in the other. One truth vanishes in the other. So here is a house. I see the house. It's almost like you let go of that truth and you move on to another truth. Very nerdy. A twofold shape of now and here. Okay, now we're in 102. What does not disappear in all this is the I as universal. So that doesn't disappear. The I stays because you're seeing it. The I is in you. It's in your perception. And that's something universal because everyone has that cognitive ability so far in them. I see a water bottle. I see this. I see that. Whose seeing is neither a seeing of the tree nor of this house, but as a simple seeing which, though mediated by the negation, so the seeing mediated by the negation. So the negation is when you don't see it. That's his dialectic. Now you see it. You didn't know it was in existence. It came into existence. You know of it. And now you have seen it. And now the I has possessed it. And you have now become to know it. And truth has come about from it. And that was mediated by the negation of not seeing it and not knowing it. It's all the same. Simple and indifferent to whatever happens in it. To the house, the tree, etc. The I is merely universal like now. Okay, so he says I is universal, now is universal, here and this in general are universal. So it seems like these are just aspects of our cognitive reality here. I do indeed mean a single I, but I can no more say what I mean in the case of I than I can in the case of now and here. So there you go. He's admitting that, here is what is here, right? I would say it's a radius and a time period. Now, also, I would say it's a radius and a time period. The I, that's a deeper question, right? Is linked to you personally, yet is as universal because everyone has an I in them because they are a singular, unless you're schizophrenic and have, a personality disorder. When I say this here, this now, or a single item, I am saying all theses. Here, nows, and single items. Similarly, when I say I, this singular I say in general all I's, Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's true. Because eyes is like a general. It's a singular, but it's a general. That's such a like a nerdy point. Because when I say I saw this, like I've seen this, it's almost like you naturally speak in a generality. You know, you get down to the specific later, but the general is implied. Yeah, it's very nerdy. That's very, very interesting. Everyone is what I say, everyone is I. This is a very good point. Yes, that is true. We kind of do that in natural language, right? I saw this and this and that. And then you get those rhetorical little tarts that are like, well, not everything applies to you, and that's uh, what is that word? Dang, I forgot what it's called. Anecdotal, right? They're like, that's when you get the anecdotal stuff, right? It's like, well, not everyone has the same perception as you. Yeah, that's anecdotal. And you're like, yes, but I saw this. So like, when you say that, it's almost like you're hoping for someone else to have the same eye. Ah, that's interesting. This singular eye, when science is faced with a demand, as if it were an acid test it could not pass, that it should deduce, construct, find a priori. Now, a priori is before sense experience. Or, however it is put, something called this thing or this one man is the reasonable that the man should say which this thing or which this particular man is meant. But it is impossible to say this. So that's interesting. That's getting at language here. This thing or which is this particular man is meant. So he's saying that science has a difficult aspect of deducing and constructing and finding out the a priori knowledge when someone speaks with these general eyes, when they say this singular this thing, right? It kind of just hints at language here, right? Everyone is what I say, everyone is I. And then he says, again, but I can no more say what I mean in the case of I than I can in the case of now and here. It's like we almost know what each other means, but we can't just use the scientific method to explain that because this is something verbal and cognitive that's outside that sort of scientific realm. It's so nerdy. Very interesting. I, as a universal whose seeing is neither a seeing of a tree nor of this house, but is a simple seeing which through mediated by negation of this house, etc. So the I is a seeing, and it is mediated through negation. And that can be an indifferent something or a simple something, right? Very interesting. What do you think, fam? We'll go through a couple more points just to reiterate. I is the universal singles. I is singular. It's just fantastic. Now remember, he contended the force of his truth lies now in the I. So the truth is in the I. And that truth is what science is saying has a difficult time because it's hard to say what even you mean, let alone what a grouping means through the I, through this singular universal truth that lies within it. And the immediacy of that it's expelled through you seeing and hearing it. Now this is very cool. Just remember, he talked about sense certainty and about knowing relation. So you're learning about the relationship between the object when it first comes on the scene, how you come to know it, what's the relationship with that, right? Very, very nerdy. Because remember, he said that the truth is in the object. It's my object. Mine. Meinen, German, right? For mine. I know. You're certainly senseful of what is there. Very cool. Really cool. Mediated simplicity or universality, pure being there. Very cool. Wow. And then essence negates being. The here and now. Two truths. Very awesome, man. The force of its truth. Twofold shape, now and here. Well, is your head spinning? Then Hegel has done his job.